Right, next speaker. I'm really excited about having Chi Ryan come up. She's the Experience Strategy Director for PwC Digital. I love the way she thinks about things. It's always really interesting and always focused on how it could be better for humans. She's not afraid to say what she thinks. I'm taken back to the Adobe Symposium when she was on the design thinking panel, and the first thing she said was design thinking is shit. And everyone was like, right, it's going to be that sort of panel. And giving myself a self-plug, the next episode of Australian Design Radio is with Chi, where we had an amazing talk all about Egyptology and all sorts of different things. So please welcome her to the stage.
Hello. I wrote some notes, so I have to put these over here. Where's the clicker? Here. My God, didn't get it. All right. Egyptology. That's interesting. What relationship does that have to design? Find out in the podcast. Because I don't know. Design for me is kind of everything, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I think it's a great follow-on from what Andy was just talking about, because I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am. So, as Matt mentioned, I'm an Experienced Strategy Director at PwC. Does anybody know what PwC is? No? A few? Do you want to explain? Do you want to yell out what it is? Consulting, yes. A lot of people would know PwC as a fiduciary company, consulting, but primarily in the financial space. I'm trying to be PC because I have to be. Auditing, accounting, and you might be wondering what the hell I'm doing working in a place like that. Sometimes I ask myself the same question. But it is a place I work. Okay, so I'm going to tell you how I got to where I am now. So I'm Chi, and I am a designer of sorts. I started out as what I would describe as a graphic designer or a visual designer, and I did have an internship. In fact, I had a couple of internships, but my first job, I suppose, is what I really think about when I think about the internship. But I think I was a designer before that. And if I ask my mum, who happens to also be a designer, that's another story for another day. But yeah, my mum's also a new designer. She's only been a designer for 2 years. If you ask mum, she probably says that I was a designer from like when I was really little. And what does that mean? I was always asking questions and trying to solve problems for people, is probably part of it. So when I really began to be a designer was probably around, I would say, year 8 at school. My English teacher asked me if I would be the editor of our school yearbook. And I was like, hell yes, I want to be the editor of the school yearbook. I get to edit all the photos. Excellent. So I started doing that, and I did that every year at school, and this kind of became a thing. And I was also really interested in graffiti. So I didn't do a lot of graffiti when I was a kid, but I was really interested in it. So I was painting a lot. And so I was doing that. So there was a lot of typography and things like that involved. So I was very interested in that. And then there was this other thing that I was doing. So I was a dirty little raver. From when I was pretty young. That's me in the middle. These two people in the photo would probably not be very happy. That is a flyer that I designed in 1997. And that was actually a little bit after I started going to raves, but these things really had a big influence on me, certainly as a designer, and as a person in general. So my very first job, my first paid job, I was 15. It was in 1995, and I wrote down a calculation because I was looking at Andy's numbers about how much interns get paid, and at the time, to give you a bit of background, I went to film school. before that. I left high school and just said, bye mum and dad, see ya, I'm off. And went to film school in Canberra. And then I was looking in the paper after I'd finished and I found this job for a graphic designer. And I went for the interview and they gave it to me. They said, yes, you're the one. And I had no idea why, but I found out later. Okay, so I was getting paid, the check that I got every 2 weeks was $190. And it was in Sydney. And I was at the time I was living at mum and dad's house in Wollongong. So that's like an hour and a bit on the train to Sydney. And I remember my mum was paying for my train ticket for me to get to work because each week, my weekly ticket, because I could barely afford to pay for my food and whatever when I got to work, as well as my monthly train ticket. So I didn't realise at the time, didn't really realise it until much later on, that the reason they gave me the job was because I was the cheapest applicant. They didn't have to pay me very much. And it was with a very famous creative director, a very, very famous creative director and typographer. I learnt a lot from him. I learnt how to get his lunch. A lot. I learned a lot about how he sold pot to everybody in our office. But he did teach me a lot about typography and other things. But I did have a lot of downtime because he never got into the office until very late. And at the same time, my dad had a web design business, a very early web design business. And so I started to realise that because I got paid so shit, that I could earn a lot more money on the side if I did visual design for dad's shitty websites. So just to prove that, I'm going to embarrass myself even more than this picture that's been on the screen for like 10 minutes. Here is an amazing website that I did the visuals for. The date on the code on this website, and I'll just do this. Does it go up? Oh, this is still live, by the way. 1997. Thank you very much. Mic drop. Yes. But you have to remember, like at the time, I was like, how old was I? 97. So I would have been like 17. Not bad for a 17-year-old in 1995. So on the side, I was working my job full-time. On the side, I was doing a lot of web design. And that was sort of how I got a flavour for digital. And it was very early on. So this is really how I kind of got into things. And from there, I moved into advertising. And it was kind of tricky because I wanted to be... I guess I wanted to be creative. So let me just flip back to what kind of designer am I? This is a question that I get asked a lot. So one of my least favourite places to ever go is a wedding. Because when people ask me what I do, and I say, oh, I'm a designer, and they say fashion designer, and I say, no, and they say tattoo designer, no. Oh, okay, what type of designer are you? And then I don't want to tell them because it's too complicated for me to answer. But I'm a lot of types of designers, and I've been called a lot of types of designers. So I've been called visual designer, I've been called art director, I've been a producer, I've been a creative director, I've been a digital designer, I've been an experience designer, I've been a service designer, I've been them all. So now I think of myself as a transdisciplinary designer. What does that even mean? Oh my God, these are really weird terms, right? Design is weird. Design is so weird. So transdisciplinary designer. There's multidisciplinary designers, which is where you might have a few different types of skills, and then there's transdisciplinary designers where you take a big pot and you mix and mix and mix, and you just keep mixing. So the way I would describe myself today is a transdisciplinary designer with 3 specialisations. So my first specialisation is visual, which is everything from illustration, typography, print design, digital design, motion. I do a lot of motion design, to installations, and I guess emerging technologies that use visual. So AR, VR, MR, projection mapping, anything visual basically is the first one. My second specialisation is spatial. So I went back to uni a bit later in my career and I studied architecture and industrial design. The reason I did that is because I had done a lot of installations, a lot of event design using digital in spaces where humans dwell, and I really like to play in that space. So now I get to do some fun things like employee experiences in spaces, retail experiences, lots of installations. I like to play in spaces, it's fun. And then my final specialisation is service design. So service design, for want of a better term, is the design of services. But that's not as simple as it sounds. Really what we're talking about is the design of complex systems and the way that they fit together and all of the products and experiences that come with it. So I umbrella all of these under experience, strategy and design. So that's really an overview of who I am today and how I see myself as a designer. The thing about design is that, like I just started to say, that I have a love-hate relationship with that word. It's been a struggle. There was periods in my career, especially when I first started and I was working in the advertising, marketing world, that I felt like I needed to be a creative and that designers were seen as monkeys. We were treated pretty badly at times, and that to be respected, you had to be an art director or a writer. And so I really tried hard to do that. And I've done all of the industry courses. I did award school, ad school, AFA, whatever, blah-de-blah, blah, all the things. It didn't make me any better of a creative because much like Marcel, there was a period some years ago where I realised that in advertising, whilst they do things that are very funny and interesting and attractive, I didn't want to sell people shit. I wanted to do something meaningful. I was trying to rip apart the briefs and I wanted to go back to the clients and say, yes, but you can sell this any way you want, but it doesn't change the fact that the product you're selling is terrible. You're ripping people off. They don't like that in advertising. They don't want you to tell the client that their products and services are terrible. They want you to just sell things, make them look beautiful. And I'm not very good at that. And I kind of came to that realization, but it was crushing. It was crushing because suddenly this industry that I'd worked in for probably 10 years was suddenly not really an option for me anymore. And to be fair, it all came crashing down one day when I'd been working at this well-known digital agency for a while, and I got frog-marched into a meeting with 3 managing directors, and they sat me down and they said, "You've been here a year and you have done nothing creative." And I was just crushed. And I said, "I'm leaving now, goodbye, I'm leaving this job." And I just walked out. Like I was like, "Fuck you, I'm not gonna work for a place that treats me like that. If you don't think I'm doing anything creative, fine, bye. Bye, Felicia." So this became a thing that I was like, I'm damned if I'm gonna act, be treated this way anymore. Like, and I guess that's, that was a turning point for me. Being told that I just wasn't that creative gave me this motivation. And there was another part to it too, that through all this time, I feel like I never really had great mentors. I felt like I really never had people that were really looking out for me. I mean, over my career early on, I did have a few, and I had a few really great creative directors that I'm still friends with now. But that said, I never felt like I really got the support I needed or wanted. And so, it really set me on this path that I guess I've been on for a while now, which is to be the leader that I never had. And leader, that's a funny word. Like, what does it mean to be a leader? I really believe that leadership, especially when it comes to design leadership, and I should also mention that I see a big difference between creative and design as well. So, design leadership is, I don't think it's something that you can choose. It's something that people give to you. When people follow the things that you're saying or the direction that you're going in, that's when you really know that you're in that space. And I sort of started to notice that people were kind of following me in that space. some people thought that I had something interesting to say. So that's kind of when it struck me, okay, like, and when I say that I wanted to be the leader that I never had, it's that I wanted to be that for myself. I wanted to give myself that thing that I'd never had before. And so I did. And this, the funny thing about, and I think Marcel illustrated this beautifully, design is a roller coaster. There's highs and there's lows, and I still go through those same highs and lows today. And I think it's fascinating that there are things happening in the mental health space, especially for people in creative industries, because God knows that there's been times, and still to this day, times where I feel like I'm alone in feeling bad about what I do. Design is truly who I am. So it's real easy to get butthurt when like someone's like rah at you because you didn't do something right, or like you didn't meet the budget, rah. Which happened to me this week. But yeah, like it's easy to get caught up in that and to get into that vicious loop of thoughts around, could I have done this better? Even like, going to embarrass you, Marcel. Even after Marcel did his little talk before, he came over and he said, I could have done that better. And sometimes I think that we designers are like just way too hard on ourselves, and we need to be a little kinder and be like, fuck yes, I smashed that. Like, that was awesome. I did a good job. It's important for us to do both of those things. We're constantly being told to review, and critique is part of the job. Being critical of design, in fact, is part of what we do, but it's also important to be kind, because we are human. We're not infallible. We are human, and we need to remember that. That's part of the practice of being a designer. Design is not for you. It's for others. It's for everyone else, and we have to bring that into our practice. So to continue on with the story, how do I get to here? So yeah, I left advertising and went and studied architecture and industrial design, and after that, that's when things really started to click for me. Because going back to university when I was, I guess I was like 30-ish. Going back to university when I was 30. It really gave me a different perspective. I went at university then like it was for me, not like I was trying to get to a career. I wanted to reinvest in who I was as a designer, what made me a designer, which now is actually part of my practice all the time, thinking about who I am as a designer. What does it mean to be me? I was doing it on the plane here last night, reevaluating my own values around design. What does it mean to put humans first? What does it mean to design for humanity? These are the things that I'm thinking about all the time. The way that I like to describe what I do is that I help my clients to bring business, technology, humanity if I can, and the environment together. And I'm helping them look at those parameters in terms of what they can do. And I think the mistake that people make about design is that they think that it's, making shit pretty. But actually what design can be used for is a risk mitigation tool. Which is funny because, I work at a place that audits and does things that are really about risk mitigation. But I see design as a risk mitigation tool as well, because it allows us to imagine up what possible futures might be. And really that's speculative design is an area of design that I'm really passionate about. So I'm sure you've all watched Black Mirror. A lot of the outputs from what I do are a bit like Black Mirror. So sometimes I make prototypes, but I make all kinds of prototypes, like not just digital ones. I make whole films, in fact, that are kind of future visions. That's part of what I do. And I think that this is something really important to understand about making your design your own, making your practice your own, and being more human in the things that you do. You have to think about those different tools that you bring with you. So it could be visual design, it could be film, it could be industrial design, it could be architecture. Now you're kind of getting the gist of why I call myself transdisciplinary, because I kind of mix them all together, right? So you can use all those different tools to bring to life whatever it is that you're designing. And this is really, and in my case, that's where the experience comes in. So when it comes to experience design, which is what I do now and have been doing for the last few years, experience design for a lot of people, and if you reply to an advert on the interwebs for a UX designer, what you are applying for is a designer, or the detailed design of digital products is probably the best way I would describe it. That is what people are generally looking for when they advertise for a UX designer, a detailed digital product designer. And that's cool if you're down with that. But I see experience design a bit differently. For me, the way that I would describe it is that experience is the delivery of the promise that a brand or organisation makes. So you know when you go, I don't know, on an airline and you buy that ticket and they said it'd be really cheap, it's the cheapest one, and you get on that, or you go to the airport and you go to check in and they say, bye-bye. You're 5 minutes late. We're not letting anybody on because we have really strict check-in times, because that's the way we keep the flights cheap, and we are not going to refund you. You feel like the organisation might not have delivered on the promise. And when we're designing for experience, we're designing for those types of situations. And what you need when you're designing for experience is you need designers of all different shapes and kinds. You need people of all different shapes and kinds to be involved in that design process, because no one person can deliver on something so complicated. And ultimately, if we work in an organisation, we're all responsible for the delivery of the experience. So we need lots of different people to bring that to life, and that's where all of these different disciplines come in together. But when it comes to designing for humans and humanity, one of the things that I get asked quite a lot is, aren't you a consultant? Because consultancies have a bit of a bad rap in some ways. The big consultancies tend to be seen as being quite robotic and not very creative. And that's true to an extent. And I've worked at a couple of them. After university, I had my own studio for a while, and then I was working at Telstra for a bit, and then I got referred for a role at Accenture. And when that job came up, I thought, I don't know. And a few of my friends were like, no way, you can't go and work there. Like, there's no way that's going to work for you. And I went through the process anyway, and it was actually for a company called Fjord. Fjord is a experience strategy and design company, is probably the best way to describe it. So I got that job, and that's where things really kind of went from there. I kind of realised, hey, I'm kind of good at this thing. So I worked in Australia first, and then I got transferred to London, where I had a global role, and I got to work all over the world. And then they moved me to Italy, where I lived in Milan, and I worked all over Europe. In 1 year, I went to 25 different countries to work in. That's pretty fun. And then I worked in Hong Kong for Isobar, and then I moved to New York to work for Idean, which is part of Capgemini, which is another consulting company. And then I moved back to Australia to work for PwC. The reason I'm telling that story is because one of the really amazing things that I've had the deep privilege of being involved in is companies who, I guess, provide opportunities well beyond my wildest dreams as a designer. I mean, I never thought as a 15-year-old getting paid $95 a week that I would ever be travelling every week for work, that I would get to go and live in places like Milan and not even speak Italian but still be able to design there. The thing about consultancies that I think is really interesting from a design perspective, your opportunities are so vast. What you can potentially do within those organisations, from both a personal perspective but also from the type of work that you can work on, is unlike anywhere else that I've worked. And I've worked in some big agencies and big companies, client side and agency side, but none offer the opportunities that I've had in consulting. So as well as the types of work. So I've worked on all different types of work throughout my life. So some on really small pieces of work that affect a small number of people, but then some pieces of work that have affected huge numbers of people. So has everybody done their tax already this year if you're working? Was it easy? Did you do it on the tax website? Did anyone? Yeah. Oh, you got your account. You're still getting an accountant to do it. Well, I did my tax online through the tax office website, and I was like, hell yes! The work that I did is actually working, because I did some work for the tax office a few years ago, and it involved the online tax process, and it was so easy, and I felt so awesome because that affects millions and millions and millions of people, which is really amazing. And that's an awesome thing to get to do, but and sometimes my work does touch millions of people in a little way, but sometimes my work touches one person in a massive way, like my mum. My mum's a nurse, and a couple of years back, she was contemplating whether or not she should retire. She hated her job. She was working at one of the big healthcare providers. She was really hating it, and she had long service leave coming up, and she said, oh, could I do one of those design courses and do some design like you? And I was like, yes, you can, Mum. Yes, you can. And so she went and did a design course, and she did that for 12 weeks and came away, and within 2 weeks she'd been made redundant. But very quickly she got headhunted, and they headhunted her because not only was she a nurse, but she had they had heard that she had done this design course, and now she's my what's it called? The opus magnus? No. What is it called? Oh, I can't think of what it's called. The premiere. She's my best piece of work. She is now working at an amazing health facility in Victoria that is one of only 2 or 3 in the world. It's called they're called people-centered care facilities. So she works with people who are fully ventilated in a home care facility. So that means people who are not able to breathe for themselves, and most of them are either quadriplegics or have muscular dystrophy, which means they can't use their arms and legs. And the whole point of this facility is to help them live the most normal, happy lives that they want to live. That's the most critical part of this. So Mum's job is the educator and experience officer. So her job is to map the experiences that they want to live, and then she teaches all the people around them, and that's hundreds of people. So doctors, nurses, family, friends, carers, how to facilitate the experience that they want to live. And that's the magic of design. There's so many aspects to design and ways that you can use it. And I think that's the thing that's really misunderstood when it comes to the value of design, right? Because design and taking a design-led approach is really just a different way of answering problems that other people might answer with traditional strategy or some other way of problem solving. And the funny thing about this is that when it comes to design and when it comes to imagining up what the future of that might look like, me included, is that there really are no rules for inventing the future. There are no rules about what's going to happen next. It is in your hands. You can take all these tools that you have and you can turn them into whatever you think it should be. The one thing that I would ask you to do, because, you know, God, and I've got to, look, there's a spelling mistake there. I left a D off. The one thing that I would ask you to do is really think about what you're making, because God knows there's a lot of shit things that are made in this world. Like, one of the things that drove me crazy living in New York was doors. Just doors, right? So I never knew whether to push them or pull them. If we can't get designing doors right, how the hell are we going to get anything else right? So what I would ask you to do is, instead of asking how might we, which is the thing that we often get taught in that old thing, design thinking, which, by the way, I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, but it's a tool for non-designers to use to get involved in the design process. Instead of asking how might we, next time you're designing something, ask why should we? Why should we make this thing? Because design is as much about not making things as it is about making things. I'm Chi. Thank you very much. I hope you had a good time. I've loved the talks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.